Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another predictions video. And in today's video, I'm be predicting the Rodriguez versus Gonzalez fight. If you are new around here, then you have to subscribe. Please do so. Like the video if you do need live here, and let's get straight into it. So, going into this fight, Rodriguez is 17-0 with 11 KOs, and Gonzalez is 15-1 with 5 KOs. This fight is for the vacant WBO World Flyweight title. Rodriguez's last fight was a win by unanimous decision versus Gonzalez, and Gonzalez's last fight was a win by KO in round 1 versus Zuniga. Gonzalez's loss came against Lars Dizabal in 2019, and since then he's on a 9-fight win streak. Rodriguez is the former WBC World Super Flyweight Champion, but he has vacated that belt to come down to try claim this belt to become a 2-weight World Champion, which I always got to respect. I think, though, it's not necessary, I suppose, in a way. I suppose if he is going to stay down in this weight division, then it is necessary, and it's a great fight. Maybe not a great fight, but it's great to see him come down in this weight division, and it's good to see him challenging for the belts in this weight division. But if he's just going to go back up again, vacate the belt again, and there's not really much point, and I don't know what's going to be happening with that, if he is going to do that or not, because I think he is chasing the Estrada fight, which is fair enough. I know he's had some big fights in the past against Quadras, of course, Rung Versailles as well. Beat some great opponents, and Estrada would just kind of add on to that list of like another legend of the sport. But if he's gonna just get this belt, vacate it straight away, what's the point? Like, there's some big fights down in this weight division, and so hopefully he either goes to fight Estrada but keeps the belt in, I suppose, both weight divisions if he beats Estrada, or he just stays and fights one of the other options like Edwards or Martinez for the won the belts in the flyweight division, because I think that is a better division for him to be campaigning in. But also on this card is Akhmadaliev versus Tapales for the IBF and WBA Super Bantamweight titles, in which I think Akhmadaliev will win via TKO in round 10. I think Akhmadaliev is a great fighter, too good of a fighter for the levels he's at the moment. I think he's going to keep developing very well. I don't know too much about Tapales. I can't even pronounce his name right, which isn't really saying much for me, I suppose. But I think it'll be another great performance from him. TKO in round 10. I think by the later rounds, he'll be able to stop him. And yeah, looking forward to this card overall. It's a good card. Moving back on to the Rodriguez-Gonzalez fight. Rodriguez, as a fighter, he picks his shots very well. He's great hand movement. He's a high-volume fighter, very attacking. Great shot selection. Changes levels well, walks you down, finds openings using great movement, close ranges. He's a close range fighter, he's a pressure fighter, and he has a high guard as well. Overall, a very good fighter, and he's coming off a very good year as well. Of course, I've just named Quadras, Rungside, 2 opponents he fought last year, as well as Gonzalez as well, and so overall great year for him. But yeah, as a fighter, the way that he does pick his shots is it's so interesting, because he'll pivot so much and find the angles very well, and that kind of pivoting style is something you don't always see at this level anymore. You don't see it as much as I'd like you to see it, because it is something that's very important and can be exploited very well, and Rodriguez does exploit that very well. And of course, he is a close range fighter, changes the levels. He's a high volume fighter as well, throws a lot of punches, and punches in bunches is tough to counter. But Rodriguez, he had that tough test versus Gonzalez. Gonzalez countered him well to the body. He has that high guard like I mentioned, but it means his body is open at times for a counter punches, and it wasn't his best performance that last fight. But I mean, he was coming off a great year, and maybe that was just why. Maybe he just kind of was due a somewhat bad, not even that bad, but somewhat lesser performance. But of course, he's a smaller guy. He can struggle against attacking fighters as well. He hasn't really faced opponents too much that's going to come and just like constantly attack. He will stay in range. Of course, that's close range fighter. It means he stay in range, which means he does get countered, and did get countered versus Gonzalez. He's willing to trade shots, which isn't always the best, but not also the worst at the same time, because if he can land 2 and then maybe the opponent lands 1, it's a fair trade, but not always something you're going to want to do. And he's got to make sure no point deductions. He got that point deduction in the last fight, and probably could have got 2 point deductions. It was a very a risky game he was playing, I suppose. And I mean, it's because he's going for them different types of shots, and it means that he's gonna sometimes, if he's fighting somebody similar height or maybe a bit bigger to him, because of course he's the smaller guy, that he's probably gonna go for an uppercut and or maybe a body shot and maybe just miss, because he's coming in from a lower angle. But it's something that he's got to make sure to cut out, because that he probably could have and maybe should have got another point deduction in that last fight, and that would have made the last fight a lot closer, and something which you just don't need. And it's definitely just a bit of a gives you peace of mind if you don't have that. And so yeah, he's got to make sure he won't have that again. But Gonzalez as a fighter, he's a long fighter. He switches stances. He throws big shots. He's tough. He starts well. Overall, it's gonna be a tough night for him, I'd say. I'd arguably say this is a bit of a step down for Rodriguez, an opponent as well. I think, of course, I've mentioned his opponents he fought last year, and I do think this is a bit of a step down, and so it's not something which I'm a massive fan of for the fight, but I still think it would be somewhat of an interesting fight, I suppose. Um, it would be interesting to see how Gonzalez uses his length, and if he can maybe throw some big shots early on and maybe start well, because Rodriguez is a little bit of a slow starter at times. I mean, he was against Gonzalez, and did let Gonzalez in the last fight get a few rounds in before, or maybe a round at least in before he started turning up a little bit, and so that's something which Gonzalez has got to do. And of course, Gonzalez does throw big punches, and so if he can do that, then that might be interesting to see if that happens. I mean, he's not overly powerful, so I don't think if he throws anything, he's going to end up knocking him out or anything like that, or even getting a knockdown in general. So I think, like I said, it'll be a tough night for Gonzalez. I mean, Gonzalez has had a year off. Not, I don't think due to injury or anything. I think he's just had a year off. He's not fought as tough of opponents. He doesn't like pressure, which against Rodriguez is something you can't really say, because Rodriguez is going to bring the pressure and it's always going to be in front of you. And he can panic under pressure at times, which is something also you don't want to see when you're facing Rodriguez. And he's, like I said, he's not overly powerful either. I'm not saying Rodriguez is crazy powerful either, but I would say he's more powerful. And I mean, that record shows of 15-5 for Gonzalez and 17-11 for Rodriguez, and of course the levels of opponents that both fighters have been facing. And so yeah, Rodriguez is the favourite for this fight, and I think that Rodriguez will win via TKO in round 6. I think it'll be a dominating performance. It'll be interesting to see what he's like coming down the weight, hopefully for him, and also for me, because I do like Rodriguez as a fighter. I think he's a very good fighter. It'll be interesting to see what he's like coming down the weight. Hopefully there's no problems with that or anything, or maybe he might struggle with giving the power as much, or it'll be interesting to see. That's probably the most thing I'm interested about for this fight. But yeah, I think he'll win convincingly, TKO round 6. And then yeah, like I said, there's options. If he wants to stay, there's Edwards Martinez, probably the best two options, and two very good options. If he wants to become like one of the pound for pound best fighters around at the moment. But if them two do fight, Edwards and Martinez, then if he wants to go for the Estrada fight, he could and might do if he goes back up. But like I said, I do want him to be campaigning down in flyweight, because now that Matchroom signed Edwards, and they also, I believe, have Martinez as well on with Matchroom, it's just going to make the fights easy to make, and they should happen, then there's no excuse really of why they shouldn't be happening. And Eddie Heard's been mentioning that fight, and so it should happen. But yeah, that is it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like if you did, like this, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.